Um, I almost did not record this. I want to start there because I think it matters. I sat with what came through before I pressed record, and I went back and forth about whether to deliver it at all. Not because it was dark, not because it was difficult or painful or the kind of thing that requires careful handling to avoid causing harm, but because of how specific it was, how unusually, almost uncomfortably specific. The kind of specific that makes you pause before you speak, because you want to be sure you are honoring what came through rather than diminishing it by delivering it carelessly. In all the time I have been doing this work, messages come through in impressions, in feelings, in broad energetic themes that I then translate into language that can reach the person it is meant for. That is the normal texture of this. That is what I am accustomed to working with. This was not that. This came through differently, fully formed, detailed in a way that felt almost like reading from a page that someone else had already written, like the message had been composed somewhere before it reached me, and I was simply the delivery point. And the reason I finally pressed record, the reason I decided that delivering it was the right thing, is because of one thing I know with complete certainty. The person this was written for is here. You are here, and the fact that you found your way to this specific message in this specific moment of your life is not something I am willing to dismiss as coincidence. So I am going to deliver it word by word, exactly as it came, and I need you to let it land, rather than processing it from a safe distance, because this was not written for the version of you that processes from a distance. It was written for the version of you that is willing, just for right now, to simply receive. The first thing that came through was not an image or a feeling or an energetic impression. It was a question. And the question was this: how long have you been explaining yourself to people who were never going to understand you? I want you to sit with that for a moment before I continue, not as a rhetorical question, as a real one. How long have you been finding the right words, constructing the right context, offering enough of your interior world to make what you are saying legible, and then watching it land just slightly off, just close enough to feel like almost but never quite arriving at actual understanding? Not because the people you were talking to were not intelligent, not because they did not care, but because there is a frequency at which you operate that most people do not naturally inhabit. A depth of perception, a quality of feeling, a way of experiencing ordinary things that is not ordinary, a way of noticing what most people move past without slowing down for. You slow down for things. You notice the texture of moments that other people experience as background. You feel the weight of things that other people process and release without the processing costing them anything. For you, it costs something. Everything costs something. And that cost, that particular price of experiencing life at the depth you experience it, has sometimes felt like a burden that nobody around you fully acknowledged because they could not fully see it. The message that came through is about that, about the specific exhaustion of being someone who feels everything at full volume in a world that tends to reward those who keep the volume low, and about what is coming for you because of it, not despite it. Because of it, the second thing that came through, and this is the part that made me pause the longest before recording, was an image. not a symbolic one, a specific one. The image of you in a particular kind of moment, a moment that I suspect you have had more than once, maybe many times, a moment where you are in the middle of something ordinary, something unremarkable, something that by any external measure is just another moment in just another day, and you are struck by a feeling, not a dramatic feeling, a quiet one, the feeling that something is about to change, not could change or might change or you hope will change, is about to, with a certainty that has no logical foundation, that you could not justify if someone asked you to explain it, that arrives without warning and sits in you with a weight that feels different from ordinary hope or wishful thinking, more settled than either of those, more certain, like knowledge rather than desire, like something your body understands before your mind has been briefed. You have had that feeling recently, more recently than feels entirely comfortable, because when that feeling arrives with the particular quality it has been arriving with lately, it is harder to dismiss as wishful thinking, harder to fold back into the category of things you want and have learned to be measured about wanting. It persists. It sits in you between other things. It surfaces at inconvenient moments and refuses to be set aside cleanly. The message that came through says this: that feeling is not wishful thinking. It is not your mind creating comfort against uncertainty. It is accurate. It is the part of you that processes information at a level beneath ordinary awareness, telling you what it knows. And what it knows is that the change you have been sensing is real and it is close, closer than you have allowed yourself to fully believe. The third layer of what came through is the one I want to spend the most time on, because it is the most specific, the most precise, the most clearly directed at you as an individual rather than as a general recipient of a general message. There is something you have not told anyone, not fully, not the complete version, something you carry in the most interior part of your experience that you have found no adequate language for, or that you found the language for and then decided that sharing it would require more explanation than you had the energy to provide. Something that lives at the intersection of what you want and what you are afraid to want too openly. Because wanting it openly creates a vulnerability that feels disproportionate to what you are willing to risk right now. It might be about a person. It might be about a direction you want your life to take. It might be about a version of yourself you have been moving toward privately without announcing the movement, because announcing it would make the stakes feel too real. Whatever it is, whatever the specific content of this unspoken thing, the message that came through says something about it that I need to deliver carefully. It says that the thing you have not said out loud has been heard, not by the people around you who do not know about it, by something larger than the people around you, by the part of existence that does not require you to speak in order to receive what you are sending. Your silence on this particular thing was not the same as the thing not being registered. Your choice to hold it privately was not the same as it existing in a vacuum. It has been moving through the world in its unspoken form, creating, building, finding its way toward the shape of its own answer. And that answer is approaching your life right now through a channel you did not create. And could not have predicted. The unspoken thing is about to become spoken, not by you, by life itself, in the form of something arriving that makes it undeniable. I want to pause here and address something directly, because I am aware that what I am describing has a quality of being almost too precisely aimed, too specifically targeted, and I know that when something feels that specific, there is a very reasonable part of the mind that becomes suspicious, that asks whether the specificity is real or whether it is the kind of broad description that anyone could apply to their own situation, if they wanted to badly enough. I want to honor that skepticism. I am not asking you to abandon it. What I am asking you to do is notice something. Notice whether what I have been describing has been landing in a specific place in you or floating above you without quite touching down. Because there is a difference between a message that sounds nice in general and a message that keeps hitting something specific and located inside you. One feels like pleasant noise. The other feels like recognition, like someone describing something they should not have access to and somehow having access to it anyway. If what you have been experiencing as I speak is the second one, if there has been a quality of something landing rather than floating, then that landing is the real confirmation, not my words, your response to them. Your body knows before your mind decides. And your body has been responding to this since the first sentence. I felt it when you arrived here. That quality of someone who needed to hear something specific and found their way to the place it was waiting. The fourth thing that came through is about a person, and I want to be specific about the quality of what I am reading rather than the identity, because the identity is yours to know and mine only to gesture toward. There is a person in your life or in your recent past or approaching your life from a direction you have not yet identified, whose connection to you is not ordinary. I do not mean that in the vague sense that all significant relationships feel non-ordinary from the inside. I mean it in the specific sense that the energetic signature between you and this person is one of the clearest things in the entire reading. It is almost luminous in how it presents. There is a recognition between you that operates at a level beneath what either of you has probably fully articulated, a sense of knowing that precedes enough shared history to justify it, a quality of ease, even amid difficulty, that does not require the same maintenance that other relationships require. Like the connection does not need to be constantly rebuilt because it has a foundation that holds even when the surface is disrupted. This person has been thinking about you with a frequency and a quality of attention that would shift something in you if you could see it directly. They carry a version of you with them into their ordinary days, into the moments that have nothing to do with you on the surface, and somehow find their way to you anyway. And what they feel about you, the full weight of it, has not been fully expressed. Not because they do not want to express it, because the gap between what they feel and what feels safe to say has been wider than they have known how to cross. That gap is closing. Something is shifting in them around this, a decision being approached, a threshold being reached. The particular fatigue of holding something significant in silence becoming heavier than the risk of letting it be known. Pay attention to this person, or to the arrival of someone who produces in you that specific quality of recognition I described. The one that precedes enough history to justify it, because what is coming from that direction is not small. The fifth layer is the one that surprised me most as it came through, because it was not about the external landscape of your life, not about what is arriving or who is thinking about you or what is shifting in the circumstances around you. It was about something internal, something that has been happening in you quietly, without announcement, over a period of time that has felt longer than it should have. A becoming, that is the word that arrived. Not a becoming in the abstract self-improvement sense, a specific becoming. The becoming of someone who has been in the process of arriving at themselves, of shedding the layers of adaptation and performance and managed self-presentation that accumulated over years of being in environments that required you to be somewhat less than you actually are in order to fit, in order to be legible, in order to not take up more space than was comfortable for the people around you. That process of reduction, that long, slow accommodation to spaces that were not quite sized for the full version of you, has been reversing quietly in your own private interior. You have been expanding back into your actual dimensions, recovering the parts of yourself that got folded away, remembering in the specific way that real remembering feels what it is like to exist without the constant low-level effort of making yourself more manageable. That remembering is almost complete. And what completes it, what brings the full version of you back online in a way that is stable and sustainable and no longer dependent on particular circumstances to maintain, is arriving from the outside in the form of everything else I have been describing. The internal and the external are moving toward each other simultaneously, like two halves of something that were always meant to meet and are finally close enough to touch. I want to talk about the most specific thing that came through. The thing I hesitated longest over. The part that made me question most seriously whether to include it because of how precisely it was directed. There is a moment coming, not a gradual shift, not a slow accumulation of small improvements that eventually adds up to something different. A moment, a specific, located, before and after kind of moment. The kind you will be able to point to later and say that was it. That was where it changed. That was the hinge. And the specific quality of this moment, the thing that makes it different from other moments that felt significant and then faded, is that it is going to arrive with a quality of rightness that is unmistakable. Not the rightness of something you talked yourself into, not the rightness of something that requires sustained effort to maintain. The effortless kind, the kind that does not need defense or justification or the ongoing work of convincing yourself that this is real. The kind that simply is, and when it arrives, when you are inside that moment, you are going to feel something that I want to prepare you for. Because I think being prepared for it will help you stay inside it rather than retreating from it out of unfamiliarity. You are going to feel seen, not in the partial, approximate, close but not quite way that has been the available version of being seen for most of your life, fully, completely, in the way that happens when the specific frequency at which you operate is finally met by something outside yourself that operates at the same frequency. No translation required, no approximation necessary, no managed version of yourself standing in for the real one. Just you, exactly as you are, being received completely by something that was made to receive exactly that. Let me speak to something I sense in you that I think is important to name before we close. A habit of pre-grieving, of arriving at the loss of something before the something has even fully arrived, of allowing the possibility of disappointment to live at the front of your experience of hope, so that you are already partially insulated against the loss before the loss has any reason to exist. I understand where that habit came from. It was built for good reasons, in response to real experiences of hoping for things that did not materialize in the form or the timing you needed them to. It is a rational adaptation to an irrational amount of disappointment, and it has protected you in ways that are real and valid. But it is costing you something right now. It is sitting between you and the full experience of what is already beginning to shift, muting it slightly, keeping you from being fully present to the early evidence, because being fully present would mean allowing yourself to be genuinely encouraged, and genuine encouragement feels like a risk. I want to ask you to take that risk, not recklessly, not by abandoning the discernment that has served you, but by allowing yourself to be actually moved by what is moving, actually encouraged by what is genuinely encouraging, actually present to the beginning of this rather than already managing your experience of it from a safe distance. The beginning of something real deserves your full presence, not the managed version, not the version that is already calculating the exit in case this is not what it appears to be. The version that is simply here, fully receiving what is being offered without immediately beginning to protect yourself from the possibility of having received it. I want to close with the last thing that came through. The final layer of this message that arrived already formed and waited while I decided whether to deliver it. It is the simplest thing, the least elaborate, and I think that is why it is the most powerful. What came through at the very end, after all the specificity and all the detail and all the layered description of what is shifting and what is arriving and what is about to change, was not more information. It was an acknowledgement of something specific about your journey that does not get named enough. How hard the unseen parts were. Not the visible difficulties, not the ones that other people could observe and offer support around. The invisible ones, the ones that happened in the private interior of your experience, where no one could fully see the weight of what you were carrying or the effort it took to keep carrying it without letting it flatten you. Those moments, the ones where you held yourself together in rooms where nobody knew you were holding yourself together, where you showed up when showing up cost you something significant, where you continued moving forward while privately carrying something that made forward motion genuinely difficult, where you chose integrity and grace and continued presence in circumstances that would have justified a very different response. Those moments were seen. not by the people in the room who did not know what they were witnessing, seen in the way that the things that actually matter get seen, in the way that is not dependent on witnesses or acknowledgement or any external validation to be real. They were seen, they were counted. They have been building something. The something they have been building is what is arriving now, shaped specifically around the specific shape of everything you carried, fitted precisely to the precise dimensions of everything you gave when giving was hard and no one was watching, and you gave it anyway. That is the most specific thing I can tell you. Not because it is the most elaborate, because it is the most true. You were seen. You were always seen. And what is coming is the proof of that